Ice Cube has always been more than a rapper. At 56, he's an icon of resistance, a man who built a career saying what others wouldn't dare. But his latest move has nothing to do with music or movies. This time, Cube is pointing a finger at Hollywood itself and at the suspicious death of Malcolm Jamal Warner. Warner wasn't just another actor. As Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show, he was America's son, a symbol of hope and representation for millions. And yet in June 2025, news quietly broke that he had drowned off the coast of Costa Rica. No eyewitnesses, no photos, no public autopsy. Within 24 hours, he was cremated before his family could even ask questions. That silence was louder than any headline. Malcolm's laptop phone and years of work disappeared. A final podcast episode where he spoke of being silenced was deleted hours after it aired, and the memoir he had been writing, reportedly hundreds of pages long, vanished without a trace. Ice Cube now claims he has proof files, recordings, and evidence that Malcolm didn't simply die, but was silenced. "I have proof they don't want you to see," Cube declared. The question is why? Why would Hollywood want Malcolm Jamal Warner gone? And what secrets was he preparing to reveal that made his death look less like an accident and more like a warning? This isn't just a story about a man's tragic end. It's about the system that tried to bury him and the truth that refuses to stay hidden. Before Malcolm Jamal Warner became a name whispered in controversy, he was a face that every American household recognized. Born in 1970 in Jersey City, New Jersey, Malcolm carried more than just a name. He was named after Malcolm X, a symbol of strength and resistance. It was almost as if destiny had already chosen him to carry a legacy bigger than himself. By 14, Malcolm stepped into the role that would define a generation, Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show. Week after week, over 30 million viewers tuned in. For nearly a decade, Malcolm wasn't just acting, he was shaping the image of young Black America on prime-time television. Charming, witty, rebellious, yet lovable Theo was the character kids related to and parents admired. But behind the smile and charisma was something deeper. Malcolm wasn't simply memorizing lines, he was observing, absorbing, questioning. Those close to him say he carried a maturity far beyond his years, a quiet awareness that the spotlight shining on him was also shaping him. While the show won Emmys and broke ratings, records Malcolm began to notice the unspoken rules of Hollywood. The way young Black actors were groomed to fit a certain image, the way their voices were polished not to empower, but to make them acceptable. Even at his peak, Malcolm was paying attention. America saw him as a teenage star, but Malcolm himself saw the system from the inside, and he was already keeping mental notes that one day he'd turn into something much more dangerous than a sitcom role. When The Cosby Show ended in 1992, many expected Malcolm Jamal Warner to chase Hollywood fame like so many child stars before him. But he didn't. Instead of signing on to big-budget comedies or action flicks, Malcolm walked away from the spotlight that had made him famous. To the public, it looked like he was fading. In reality, he was making a choice that would define the rest of his life. Malcolm turned toward independent projects, documentaries, spoken word, and public talks about mental health and Black identity. He said it plainly, "I don't need to be famous to be respected. I need to be real so I can sleep at night." That wasn't just a quote, it was a warning sign of where his path was headed. Unlike many of his peers, Malcolm wasn't chasing money or image. He was chasing truth. He began journaling, recording conversations, and keeping detailed notes about what he'd seen behind closed doors. To him, Hollywood wasn't just entertainment, it was a machine, one that polished certain stories while burying others. And Malcolm wasn't afraid to admit he had questions. Why were Black artists constantly told to smile, soften their voices, and play roles that didn't reflect their real lives? Why did success always come with conditions? Conditions that felt more like chains than opportunities. Slowly, Malcolm stopped being just an actor and became something far more dangerous, a witness. A man willing to speak about what others stayed quiet on. And that shift from star to truth seeker would lead him onto a collision course with the very system that once made him famous. By 2022, Malcolm Jamal Warner was no longer just keeping notes. He was building something bigger. Quietly, with a handful of trusted collaborators, he began working on 2 projects that, if completed, could have shaken Hollywood at its core, a memoir and a documentary, both under the title Hiding in Plain View. This wasn't going to be another celebrity memoir filled with nostalgia and career highlights. According to those close to him, Malcolm's manuscript stretched past 300 pages and contained internal documents, emails, and testimonies. It wasn't a story of fame, it was an indictment of an industry. Names were named, dates were logged, contracts were analyzed, and at the very center of his investigation stood Bill Cosby, once his on-screen father, now described in Malcolm's notes as a gatekeeper, a man who opened doors for young black actors but also kept them firmly in place. The documentary was just as ambitious. Working with little more than a handheld camera and encrypted storage, Malcolm interviewed actors, writers, and crew members who had been quietly erased from the industry. He wasn't filming for recognition, he was filming as if his life depended on it. And maybe it did. Those who saw fragments of the work say it was explosive, too direct, too undeniable. Malcolm wasn't just questioning the system, he was exposing the blueprint of how it operated. That made him a liability, not just to individuals, but to the entire machine. And by late 2023, Malcolm started to feel the weight of what he was carrying. Roles disappeared, sponsorships pulled away, friends warned him to stop. But Malcolm kept going, because once you start uncovering truth, this big stopping is no longer an option. By the end of 2023, people close to Malcolm noticed something was changing. The man who once carried himself with humor and calm now moved like someone waiting for a knock at the door. He was still present at home, still gentle with his wife, but there was a weight in his eyes, like he was living with a shadow that no one else could see. Friends described subtle but alarming shifts. Malcolm stopped using ride-hailing apps he had relied on for years, choosing instead to pay for private rides in cash. He changed gyms overnight, telling no one why. His phone, once filled with notes, schedules, and recordings, was suddenly empty, used only for brief calls. Even his closest colleagues began to notice he avoided cameras. One director recalled trying to take a selfie with him on set, only for Malcolm to pull the phone down, whispering, "Don't check me in. Don't tag me anywhere." At home, his paranoia deepened. He checked security cameras, repeatedly installed anti-surveillance software on his devices, and even asked his wife not to walk alone at night. In a handwritten journal found later, one line appeared over and over again, like a mantra: "If they come, leave behind the voice." To outsiders, these behaviors looked like stress or exhaustion. To those who knew him best, it was something else, a man who believed he was being watched. And whether that belief was real or not, it began shaping every choice he made. Malcolm wasn't just preparing a project anymore. He was preparing for something darker, something he feared was coming. Then, without warning, Malcolm Jamal Warner's voice reappeared. 4 days before his sudden trip to Costa Rica, a new podcast episode surfaced on his channel. It wasn't polished, it wasn't promoted, it was raw. No intro music, no production cuts, just Malcolm's voice. The episode was titled, "When They Won't Let You Speak." For 27 minutes, he spoke slowly, as if carrying a weight too heavy to release all at once. He never named names, but his meaning was unmistakable. He talked about mentors who had become shadows, about a world where you only exist if you play by their rules, and about the exhaustion of living under expectations that were never his own. The most chilling line came near the end. There comes a point when silence becomes more dangerous than speaking up. I've been there. Listeners who caught the episode before it vanished said Malcolm sounded drained, yet resolute. His words hinted at betrayal surveillance and a truth he could no longer carry alone. And then just 12 hours after it went live, the episode disappeared. No explanation, no notice. The podcast channel remained intact, every past episode still available, but When They Won't Let You Speak was erased as if it had never existed. For many, that was the moment his warnings became undeniable. Malcolm had left behind a breadcrumb trail, a final message disguised as reflection. To some, it was a farewell. To others, it was proof. And then just days later, Malcolm boarded a flight to Costa Rica. With no laptop, no camera, no recording gear, only a small notebook. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. On June 3rd, 2025, headlines quietly announced it: Malcolm Jamal Warner had drowned while swimming off the coast of Costa Rica. For most news outlets, it was a passing story, tragic, but brief, buried under lighter entertainment updates. But for those who knew Malcolm, the details didn't sit right. First came the speed. Within 24 hours of being found, Malcolm's body was cremated, no public autopsy, no DNA samples preserved. His wife and mother said they never gave written consent, yet officials insisted it had already been arranged. Pamela Warner, his mother, told independent media, "We didn't sign anything. They said it was his wish, but we never heard him say that." Then came the missing belongings. Malcolm's hotel room was cleaned out. No laptop, no camera, no phone, not even the small hard drives he always carried. His email account was locked 2 days later by user request or legal representative. But Malcolm never appointed anyone. Even his cloud backups, encrypted and stored in multiple locations, were suddenly inaccessible. And finally came the silence. Hollywood, usually quick to mourn its stars, said almost nothing. No memorial tributes, no cast reunions, not a word from Bill Cosby, the man who had once called Malcolm his son on national television. That silence echoed louder than condolences ever could. To the world, it was an accident. To his family, it was a nightmare without answers. And to Ice Cube, it was proof that Malcolm's warnings had come true. Because when deaths are handled this quickly, when evidence disappears without explanation, and when the industry looks the other way, the question isn't how someone died. The real question is why. While Hollywood stayed quiet, Ice Cube did the opposite. In a world of carefully worded press statements and staged condolences, Cube sat in front of a camera. No makeup, no production team, no corporate filter, and said what no one else dared. "I know what Malcolm told me. I know he was scared, and I know he didn't die the way they said he did." It wasn't a polished press release. It was a 9-minute video, grainy and raw, uploaded to an independent platform outside the reach of the major networks. And it hit harder than any headline. Cube revealed that he had been in contact with Malcolm in the months leading up to his death. Malcolm had shared fragments of his project, pieces of his manuscript, even encrypted files. According to Cube, those files vanished from the cloud just 48 hours after Malcolm's death. But Cube didn't stop there. He claimed to have received a USB drive from one of Malcolm's collaborators. On it were digital traces, metadata logs, showing unauthorized access attempts on Malcolm's accounts, files titled "Hiding in Plain View," "Final Draft," and "Journal." Part 3 had been targeted, altered, and then erased. And then came the bombshell. Cube said he had listened to a 2-minute audio recording allegedly pulled from a private Zoom call. In it, 3 voices discussed handling a situation before it blew up. They never said Malcolm's name, but Cube was certain of what he heard and who those voices belonged to. Hollywood may have tried to bury Malcolm's story, but Cube had just dug it back up. And with one shaky video, he forced the industry to face a question it had avoided for months. What really happened to Malcolm Jamal Warner? Ice Cube's video spread like wildfire. At first, it was shared on small forums, then on independent blogs, and within days, hashtags began to trend. "You earned justice for Malcolm," "Yanjir, where is the footage?" Ice Cube knows. What mainstream media ignored, the internet amplified, and soon silence was no longer an option. Independent filmmakers and podcasters resurfaced old clips of Malcolm hinting at hidden struggles. A documentary producer recalled how Malcolm once whispered to him, "If they erase me, don't let them erase the story." That clip, barely a minute long, went viral overnight. Even people inside the industry began to break ranks. A former writer from The Cosby Show said on a podcast, "One day, Malcolm's name was just gone from our email chains like someone wanted him deleted from the system itself." The statement was brief, but chilling. Then came the moment that set social media ablaze. An Emmy-winning actor posted 3 simple words on Twitter. He was right. No names, no context. Within hours, the post was deleted. But by then, screenshots had already flooded every corner of the internet. Meanwhile, Cube pushed forward. He announced his own project, a documentary titled "Rewrite Me If You Dare." Unlike Malcolm's unfinished work, Cube vowed this one wouldn't be buried. It wouldn't run through Hollywood studios or streaming platforms. Instead, it would be released independently encrypted and screened directly in communities. Support poured in. Artists who had once stayed silent now began reposting Malcolm's quotes. Anonymous insiders leaked emails and contracts. For the first time since Malcolm's death, the cracks in Hollywood's silence began to widen, because Cube's message wasn't just about one man, it was about a movement to make sure Malcolm's voice, his real voice, would never be erased again. Malcolm Jamal Warner was more than an actor. He was a symbol of a generation, a young man who grew up in America's living rooms and then tried to tell the truth about the very system that made him. And for that, his voice was cut short. The official story says he drowned in Costa Rica, but the missing devices, the deleted podcast, the rushed cremation, and the eerie silence from Hollywood paint a different picture, one that feels less like tragedy and more like erasure. Malcolm once wrote in his journal, "If something happens, don't let them tell the story for me." Today, that warning rings louder than ever. Ice Cube has made it his mission to honor that request. His words, his evidence, and his defiance have forced people to look at Malcolm's death not as an accident, but as a warning. And now the responsibility isn't just his, it's ours. Because when truth is buried, it doesn't die, it waits. It waits for the right time, the right voices, the right people to uncover it. Maybe that time is now. So the question becomes, will we let Malcolm's story fade into silence the way Hollywood intended? Or will we carry it forward piece by piece until the truth no longer hides in plain sight? If this story matters to you, don't stay quiet. Like, share, and subscribe, because sometimes exposing what's hidden doesn't take millions of dollars or powerful connections. Sometimes it just takes enough of us refusing to look away. Malcolm's life was light. His death was shadow. But truth, no matter how deep it's buried, always finds a way back.